Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. Get ready to hear stories of someone brave enough to bear it all. Let's get naked. Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. Today I have Amy Lewis, and this is cool because it's not very often I'm interviewing somebody that I know that lives in my area. So Amy, you and I both live in Reno, and we've met. We hugged before the coronavirus happened pretty recently. And your business is craniowave.com. So tell us about that.
Well, cranial wave is, I practice craniosacral therapy. So your cranial wave is that part that I work on in your body, your actual, your brain and spinal cord. The covering of the brain and spinal cord create this like sac that moves, right? The cerebrospinal fluid. So it's like riding someone's wave when I'm working on them. So cranial wave. So I'm working on your wave. That's where cranial wave came from. But as a craniosacral therapist, I really work on releasing restrictions from the body. And those restrictions can be in any form, whether that's a physical trauma, accident, injury. It can be a mental belief or thought pattern. It can be emotions that get stuck from trauma or from an injury. So whatever level, it can be something you bring in with you that is just stuck in there, stuck in the body. So it's really working on the body to release restrictions on all levels.
And is the pain anywhere in your body?
It's anywhere in your body. So how it started was this cranial rhythm, in the cerebrospinal fluid, the brain and spinal cord, the meninges, right? But we moved out and work on any membrane or soft tissue. So that's fascia, muscle, bone. I mean, I can work anywhere, immune system. I've been doing it for about 25 years. So I've gotten pretty good at listening with my hands.
I love that. Do you feel people when you walk into a room? Because we were recently at a conference together. Mm-hmm. Do you feel people in the room that are hurting?
I think some of us have extra senses than the five, right? And I do feel that I work really hard to not encroach on people or to go in without permission. So I usually bring my antenna in when I'm in a group because, it's that way. But usually when I tell people what I do, then they come right to me, mm-hmm. right? Those people. So then they'll come up, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I'm like, let's have a conversation.
And people hold their pain everywhere.
People hold their pain. So usually what they're coming in for is not, we work on that, but usually there's something deeper, something older. Usually we work in, as you know, layers. So if you think about your body as a onion, you have some traumas that go just a little bit in, maybe to the, like you have a shoulder issue. Some go deeper, some go all the way into the core of us, which I call life lessons, or something that I'm working with my whole life. It's with me. Have you ever had that where you're like, gosh, I've done so much work on this issue. When am I going to be done? And I just am like, there's always more because it's the life lesson. So,
yes, might have actually said those exact words in the past. Yeah. Like, what? Why is this again? I don't want to do this one.
I can tell you, I've had so many people on my table that says, and they'll come up and they'll say, I've already worked on this. I've done all the therapy, la, 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 la. And I said, well, have you released it from your body? And they say, nah. So I said, well, now's your time. Or, and there's no, I want to rephrase. If someone doesn't want to go someplace, we don't. So it's really, we partner. So I'm an expert in cranial, but you're an expert in your body. So if there's something that's too much for you, I do not want someone to go into the straitjacket in the white room. I want them to be able to manage. So we go in baby steps, and you really lead the session and I follow. So that's a real key is I'm following your body's innate healing wisdom. And it gives me signs through the physical body that this is significant. So I'll stop and maybe ask a question, an open-ended question to open the dialogue. If you're really cooking, and what I mean by that is you're really deep in that deep, quiet place, I will let you just process because it's happening so fast. If I ask that question, I actually bring you up and out of process. So really just listening to the body and where where you are. Sometimes there's no dialogue, sometimes there's a little dialogue, and purpose of dialogue is to help you go in. So if you're already in that space of working with the healing and the trauma, then I just follow and work on the body. I mean, I'm just with you right there. I really walk with you on your journey to healing and, health.
I love the analogy of the onion in the kids movie Shrek. That's like the funniest place you see that. That's I would like an onion. You've got to peel back the layers, but it is so true.
It's so true. It's so true. And the layers that we do not want to address, it's just like a stubbed toe. You will keep hitting it. You will keep hitting it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so painful. So you will. It's like a magnet. You attract more of the same, right? And so it may show up a little different, but it's like, gosh, I'm back here again. What the heck? It's like the walking down the sidewalk, right? You fall into the hole. That story.
No, you're walking through the sidewalk.
So you walk down the sidewalk. You're walking down the street. You turn onto a sidewalk, and all of a sudden you fall into a hole. You're like, what the heck? How did I get here? Oh my gosh, I don't know how to get out. I'm stuck. Ah! So time passes, and you somehow get out, but you really don't know. So you walk down that strange street, you turn down that residential area, you see the hole right before you slide in again. You're like, oh my gosh, for gosh sake. Ah! It's easier to get out, but you're like, I am never going in that hole again. So you walk down the street again, you turn into that residential area, you see the hole, you're like, I'm going to go around it. And you start to go around it, but you slide in. You're like, Jordan, and you know how to get out. You're familiar now, becoming conscious. So then you do it again. You're walking down the street. You turn down that road. You see the sidewalk, and you see the hole. And you're like, okay. And you walk way around it. So you're like, yes, I did it. And then the last time you walk down the road, you turn to go, and you say, do I really need you can go down that road? And you keep walking.
Got it. Oh, all right. Yeah, it takes a few times, doesn't it? Like a 2x4. Tell me about the training to do this, because I loved when I first met you a couple of years ago and you were like, yeah, I help people with the issues in their tissues and pain. And I was like, oh, and the way you said it made so much sense because we hold on to so much in our bodies. And I loved it. What's the training like to learn this?
Sure. So with craniosacral therapy, you practice under another license. So you can practice as an MD, you can practice as a nurse, you can practice as a dentist, you can practice as a occupational therapist, physical therapist. I practice under massage therapy. So when I first started in 1995, lay people could take the first class because, Dr. Upledger, I practiced, or I got all my training through the Upledger Institute. He was a DO. An osteopathic doctor, so cranial is based out of osteopathic principles, and he just thought more than DOs needed the techniques, so he opened it up to anyone who had a license. But he also allowed lay people to come into the first class because, when you have someone who has an issue, a child, a husband, a wife, a parent, he wanted you to be able to have some tools. So in the first class, at that point, you'd learn some techniques that would really help. Anymore, they don't allow lay people. You have to have some type of license you're practicing under because they want you to have lingo and some anatomy and when they're talking. And so with Upledger, getting back to the training, you start in Cranial 1, and that's basic principles. You learn the 10-step protocol, and then you go to Cranial 2, you learn mouth work. So it's a building process, and there's a core group of classes. And then from there, you can go to different advanced classes. So I take a class at least every 2 years. In the last 2 years, I've taken 5 classes. I did an immune class, a set of immune classes and cranial. So we looked at the thorax, we looked at the pelvis, we looked at the extremities, we looked at the whole body, and we looked at the neck and brain. And it's a whole class, so it took about 2 years to go through that series, but it was pretty phenomenal. Really took me into it. So now when I'm working, I also go into the immune system in that area because immunity is all over the body. It's not a system like your cardio system or your digestive system. You have immunity everywhere, but you don't have it in some places. You shouldn't have it, let's say, in the blood vessels. should be in the blood, but not the blood vessels. So if you have trauma in the blood vessels, you may have some inflammation. And inflammation is the response of the immune system.
I just think what you do is so fascinating just from that whole science standpoint. And then that's why I asked about the training, because I was pretty sure I was correct that you had to get it through very specific routes.
Right.
And so, because there's a differentiation between energy work and what you're doing, and it's a huge differentiation, but there are some overlapping principles. And so I love it. I think it's so neat. And I also love the theory that we can have trauma, even trauma that we don't necessarily consciously remember, that we're just hanging on to. I think we've seen a spike in anxiety and depression. I know with working with foster kids, there's definitely been a spike, and a spike since with social media with sexual issues. So have you seen the same sort of spikes in that with anxiety?
Well, I've seen a spike in anxiety for sure. More people come in as that's one of their issues. And, a lot of times people have issues and then it manifests in the physical body. So sometimes it doesn't have to be an actual, let's say, mind racing or monkey mind, or you get on the hamster. That is not a physical trauma. That's not a physical manifestation. That's something I'm doing in my mind that then creates physicality. So then that creates anxiety, that can create mind fog, that can create tension, right? And so really one of the things that's so important that works so well is our stress response to things, right? So how do we respond to stress? We have these hardwired responses that protect us. And so when we experience a threat, okay, this is really important. Flight fight responds to a real threat or a perceived threat. So if I'm worrying, I love to use worry. I'm worrying about something. I'm thinking about something that either happened before, but is not happening right now, or it's going to happen in the future. I'm thinking about something forward thinking, but I'm thinking about it. What does my body do? It responds to my thinking, my worry. So then maybe I have some tension, some racing heart, some clenching, some shoulder clenching, right? Some butt clenching, right? I mean, these are a lot of people don't realize they clench their butt, but they are, because that's your biggest muscle. So you're going to either fight or you're going to get ready to run. So these are ways that, like I ask, so how often do you clench? Is it daily? Is it weekly? That's going to tell me how, what's this slow drip of flight fight? Because if you're having tension in the shoulder, the jaw, the butt, the big muscles, right? What's happening in your little muscles or your blood vessels, right? So we talk about hypertension. That's high blood pressure. There's too much tension in your blood vessels. But you don't feel those. You don't feel the tension in your gut. Some people do. They get, nausea or, that's part of anxiety. So there's so many overlaps, right? That threat, just now with what's going on, the whole world is going, some of it, like 2 weeks ago, was a perceived threat. It wasn't real yet for a lot of us, but it was, we were, crisis. It's like, what's happening? So perceived threat or real threat. And you have this switch. It's not like, Jen, I'm thinking, am I going to run away? Am I going to die? Am I going to punch him in the face? Or am I going to freeze up? It's like, boom. Because if you had to think about it, you would already be dead.
Right.
You'd be dead. You can't, conscious thought takes 3 to 7 seconds. You cannot, you don't have that much time. You see, I get so excited.
Yeah. But you know what? There's fight, flight, and freeze, which you just mentioned, that people don't realize that sometimes your reaction is that you freeze too. And
that's a big one. And that is a big one. And that is not your sympathetic system or the fight. It's actually a parasympathetic, or the part of you that calms you down, right? After a fight. But the freeze, you have such a rush of it, you go into freeze mode. And again, it's even a deeper or more primitive response than fight, believe it or not. And so those of us who prefer freeze It's again, it's like the possum. It's not like you're acting dead. You are dead. That's the freeze, so that you will be perceived as dead. So
Okay.
your threat will go away. So when your boss is yelling at you and you go, and you don't say anything, and then you walk out of the room, and then, you walk into the elevator, you go down the elevator, you get out. So about 3 to 5 minutes later, you're like, gosh, I wish I would have said this. I wish I, see, you're unfreezing. You're unfreezing, but at the moment you're like, it's so he doesn't attack you more.
Right. Your examples are awesome because it's so easy for all of us because I don't think I freeze very often, but I've definitely, as a matter of fact, I think I can tell you that time that I said the exact thing I wanted to say at the exact time, and I'm so glad that I did, is because I didn't freeze.
Right.
But we're not processing all of that information. You just, yeah.
So we have preferences. We have preferences. So some of us use polite more. Ideally, we want to use all of them, all three, depending on the situation, because sometimes freeze is the appropriate response. But the thing is if we get stuck in a pattern, like we only freeze, then we can't fight when we need to fight, or, so we want to be able to use all of them versatile. That's what we want,
and not use them when it's a perceived, because you're talking about COVID-19. When this releases, it won't have been 2 weeks anymore, but we saw things happening in the world, and we saw our freedom being threatened and our health being threatened, and everybody instantly reacted to that because at that point it was a perceived threat. We didn't know very much. We didn't understand what was happening. We were trying to piece it together. And
so, right. And if you live in Reno, where we have 67 cases so far versus New York City, who's on, has several cases, there's different levels of threat. And that's important to identify. One of the things I keep asking myself is, what are we basing these decisions on? Is it time? Or is it conditions? And if it is, right now, to me, as a healthcare provider and someone who studied public health, it really needs to be on conditions. Like, what are the conditions that are going to help us, move forward or stay where we are? But just to have this blanket down, to me is interesting, because it really does trigger that control.
Oh my gosh.
What's happening?
Oh my gosh. I have an interesting theory during this quarantine, regardless of when people listen to this. I am like the ultimate extrovert, so I thrive on people, but I work at home. We're minimalists. My office is really small. You would think for somebody so extroverted, like, how could I stay in this small area by myself and just work? And I'm totally fine with it. And this situation's happening, and there were jokes at first, all the introverts saying, "Oh, finally people speaking my language, I get to stay home," and they're the ones that are freaking out the most.
Yeah, I get this thing with extroverts. I'm an extrovert too.
Right.
But I love my home space. I mean, when people say you're so quiet at home, or you're so blah blah blah, and I'm like, well, I don't think it has anything to do with liking people or talking to people as much as I'm talking to people a lot still.
Yeah, I am too.
I'm engaging, so I think it's, for me anyway, that's
it is interesting in the ways that people are really upset and freaking out, and I'm like, weren't you the one saying you never wanted to leave your house? Like, you got your wish, and now you're freaking. It's interesting. Our reactions are interesting to control. Yes. Let's go back and talk about your story from when you were born, and or it doesn't have to be right when you were born, but when things started to be real difficult for you in your life.
Okay, well, it started when I was born.
Okay. Nailed it.
Nailed it. There you go. I mean, it's just, so I was born with my umbilical cord wrapped around my throat.
Okay.
And so didn't know that until I started to know that around 12-ish, but I'll come back to that. So when I'll fast forward to 12, when I was 12, the style of clothing were that button-up shirts with the ties.
Oh yeah.
Like that. And you have to button up in the little collar. So this is 7th grade. I'm like, wanting to fit in. 7th grade is like molting chicken. You're so awkward, and so, you want to look so good, but you don't. So here I am in this, and I can't stand anything around my throat. I just cannot stand it. I keep it for like 10 minutes, and then I'm ripping the buttons off. Can't handle chokers. I'm like, Mom, what is wrong with me? And she just said it like blasé or passing. Well, maybe it was because you're you had the umbilical cord wrapped around your throat. So then I just remember that. So then, in my 20s, when I started looking at my pain, I asked her again, and she told me the story where when I was born, I was struggling. So they had to go in and as he's trying to get it off, it rips off, right? And I mean, I didn't have the little tag or anything, and my belly button as a child looked like a button. It didn't have the innie or the outie. It was just this little button because the whole thing ripped off on its own. So when I came out, it was still there, so I couldn't take that first breath. So I had a lot of inhale issues, which, I just struggled with breathing, right? So and of course that was all unconscious. I knew nothing of that. I mean, I've learned more as I've done my own work. That's what's been revealed or become conscious to me. So, which has been really powerful. So right at the beginning, I came out and I was struggling to, live. So then, so a lot of my trauma came out when I got married. I got married in my 20s and really struggled with my sexuality because I just was so frozen and I didn't understand why. And I did in college, I went to see the college counselor, where they're practicing, and we would talk about, why is it so hard for me, like, to have an orgasm? It was very hard. It just took forever. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? I just felt frozen from the waist down. So when I got married and moved to Virginia, I did some really deep therapy. And out of that came that I was molested I was between 18 months and 2 years. And by a family member, an external, like a extended family member. Because my mom, at that time, when I was born, I had 2 older sisters. So in 3 years, she had 3 children, basically. So we were very close together. So she was doing some cleaning one day and she busted her meniscus. And at that time, that was a big hospital stay. And when she got to the hospital and she was there, she got pneumonia. So then she had to stay. And my 2 older sisters were able to go to a little preschool that my grandma ran. But I was too young because I wasn't potty trained. So I went to live with an extended family member and their family. And so what happened during that time, I was there for about 6 months because she was really sick. She couldn't take care of me. And my dad was working. So it was just one of those situations where that happened. And so between the two, the birth and this piece of being molested, so it was oral trauma. So anything around the mouth and the throat and the breathing was very significant. So I learned all of that in my 20s. So all during my childhood, I had all these sicknesses. I always had throat issue. So I had my tonsils out. I had an abscess. I had strep throat every couple of years. It was always in my throat. And very interesting. So that was part of it, right? And why my throat? Why my throat? And it was like this whole thing. And so through cranial practice of my own, doing my own body work, this was revealed to me. And so dentistry was hard for me. Being in the mouth, anything in the mouth was just brutally, brutally hard. I still today, any dentist I work with, I have to share that with them because obviously it affects the work. And sometimes if I have to have I only can go for about an hour and a half in the dentist chair. And then the tears start coming. And then they just, dentists do not like people crying in the chair. It's just like, like, oh, please don't do it. And he'll go, what can I do? I said, can you stop? Well, you got a hole in your tooth. I said, well, then I'm going to cry and you keep working and then we're fine. And so it's just, I mean, it's good. I mean, I'm to a place where it's good, but it's the trauma, so many levels, with freezing and working with my husband on that in terms of sexuality. That took a long time, but that healed. We've done a lot of work in our marriage and our sexuality, so that healed. But the child came to the bed a lot, into an adult relationship. One of the tricks I learned was, hey, maybe you need to put your child to bed. This isn't appropriate for them. That's part of me. So,
Hang on, you're breaking up.
oh,
That's okay. I don't know why, but suddenly the sound was just not there. So I heard you say it's not appropriate to bring your child to bed, which is an awesome way to say it.
So I would literally say, you need to go take a nap, or it's time for bed. So I would separate that part out. And she was called like wee one. She's my wee one. And so just a lot of work like that was really important and helpful, and a lot of cranial work, to help me release the trauma from my body. Because there was one therapy session I had in cranial where it was like I had to decide, I was having two things go at the same time, which this is connected to the birth. I had to decide whether to swallow or to die. So if I didn't swallow, I'm dying. If I swallow, I'm taking in semen. Very hard. And then at the same time, I stop breathing, and I'm having that trauma. I'm experiencing the trauma of molestation, and underneath that, experience the trauma of like as if I was not breathing, even though when I checked in, I'm breathing, but I feel like I'm not breathing, like birth. It's just it's mind blowing, right? It's bending the mind. So,
and even though, not that this is, I'm not justifying this or diminishing this, even though the molestation trauma was oral, you still had trouble with your own orgasms, which is vaginal, like two totally different parts of the body. But did you perceive anything sexual? What is that connection?
I think it was, that's a good question. I've never thought of that. So I guess what I would say to that is, here's what I would say. So sexuality is, I think of it as layers, right? Or, like I was not ready.
Yeah.
It was like a flower bud. So I'm like in the green rose where it's just like this. And I was forced open at 2 to experience something that as I grew older, knew that was not appropriate, right? It's like coming through my sheaths of development. So it blew me into a rose, but it was too much. I didn't have the skill set. So I went further and further in instead of wanting to come out and explore my sexuality, or really anything. I was very into staying controlled, and I would say almost rigid. I did not like turning the page. I wanted to be in control. I can't tell you how many times people would say, just go with the flow. And I'm like, don't tell me to go with the flow. Or I just had this experience. Someone said, I was struggling and I was crying. And they said to me, they didn't know me very well. They said, it's okay. It's okay. And I'm like, fuck that. It is not okay in this moment. So don't tell me it's going to be okay, because it's not in this moment. If you would have said, what do you need to be okay? See, I just think that's just such a, it's more about them than me. Like, it's not okay for them, so they want me to be okay.
That's uncomfortable. Right.
And for children, when it's not okay and you say it's okay, it's a big fat lie. And they feel like they're like at 2, that's like a death. It really is all or nothing. That's the developmental stage. All or nothing is a young developmental stage where I'm either happy and everything's good, or I'm miserable and I'm dying. It really is that way. And so when someone says, oh, it's okay, and I'm like, I feel like I'm going to die here, and you're telling me it's okay.
Right.
I mean, it's, so I guess that budding, that pre-budding, and it was so nonverbal. See, that was the other thing, barely speaking. So, when I think when was having sex as an adult, it would trigger that place where I didn't know what was going on. And so it would just trigger going back into that, even though it was a different part.
Right.
It still is in every cell, the whole body freezes, or the whole body tenses. I mean, it's, especially, I think the piece about dying, like swallowing. It's like, this is not fun. There's nothing fun about it. I cannot let go.
That was good. That was great. There's no wrong answer.
No, I know. I'm just talking it through. I mean, it's like,
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think it's so fascinating to me that at 12, I'm the same way. I don't know why. I just don't like things on my neck either, but I don't have that same experience. And I'm not as upset by it like you are. But when you say like those things, those bows, I was like, not wearing that. That's not happening. But it's interesting that your mom was like, oh, it could be because the umbilical cord was around you. Like, what a great thing that she said that or recognized it or even attached that or was able to tell you that story. That's so great because you're right. That probably planted a seed for you where you might not have thought that much about it at the time, but later you were like, wait a minute.
right. It was
Wait a
definitely
minute, there's something here. And that's not anything she did or the doctor did or you did, or, I mean, it just was a situation, right? So
yeah.
very interesting. That's fascinating to me. When you were in your 20s and you were doing your own cranial work and you had a bigger conversation with your mom about the umbilical cord, did you also talk to her about the molestation?
Yeah. Well, so first the molestation, yes. And my parents, I have to say, they're just, they're ahead of the time. I swear. They're so good about acknowledging and not making wrong and listening. I mean, I think the thing with my parents, I'm one of 8. So I was third, there's 5 more children after me. And they really grew, so the way they parented my sisters and I is definitely different the way they parented my brothers, because they were at the end of the line. And they grew as parents, and I got to experience that as an adult child where they really did a lot of listening, and I think they handled it in the best way. They acknowledged, they believed me, and it was, I know it was hard for them, but they didn't make me wrong or make me feel bad or like it didn't happen. And sometimes I would get angry, like, why did you, like there was that part about, there was the part that the child saying, why did you leave me? But then the adult saying, I understand, you were sick, you couldn't take care of me. I mean, it wasn't their fault.
Right.
So
I'm glad that was kind of a side note out of my own curiosity, if you were able to ever do that. And what were their thoughts about the fact that you got sick so often when you were young and it was all throat related, even just the umbilical cord, even just that information? I mean, I would have thought your mom, with the comment in 7th grade, would have been curious if that had anything to do with you getting sick and it having it always be in your throat.
I think, the other thing, I don't think she was tired having
Yeah.
so many
No, I know.
kids.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, having a lot of kids. So I don't think she made that connection when I was sick. When we talked about it later,
Yeah.
that made sense to her. She could see that. I mean, she definitely could see that and said, wow, that makes sense. And yeah, the abscess one was the biggest one because my throat was closing. I couldn't, and my tonsils were like marbles. They were just huge. So it was closing the throat, and there was, because I had a big abscess. So I was hospitalized, and they wouldn't let parents stay in the room at that time. So I remember being 7 and the nurse saying, well, they can watch you on a monitor screen at home. And that's what made me feel safe. I mean, even though that wasn't true, she told me a little fib, but it worked because,
That's awesome.
I'm like, because I had to stay there by myself.
That was actually exceptionally great of
I
that
know, I thought,
nurse.
those nurses, they're so good.
They're so good. That's really great.
I love nurses.
So that was when you were 7. So tell me what happened when you were 10, because this is a completely unrelated situation.
So 10, we lived in Southern California. My parents came up to Reno to visit some friends and to look at the area. And I was staying with some friends. I went on a bike ride and no helmets then, of course. And when we were coming home, we went to visit one of her friends. When we were coming home, I was riding down this long hill that kept gradually getting, it was really long. This bike had foot pedals, and I was used to hand pedals, brakes. So as I went faster, I started to get a little scared. Well, I was doing this, like brake, and I was going faster and faster. And I think finally I found the foot brakes and hit them too hard, and I went over the handlebars and landed on the pavement, asphalt, and fractured my skull pretty badly. And so I was unconscious. My sister was there and the friend, and they went to get her mom. She came back. I was still out. I was in the ambulance. I woke up in the ambulance, said, "Where's my barrette?" That's where I get right there. "Where's my barrette?" Went back out. I woke up in the hospital. My parents were there, so I was out for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty big trauma. So, and at that point, for head trauma, they just sent you home. They sent me home as a 10-year-old and said to be quiet. I couldn't go to school for a month. And the pain was so excruciating, and of course I have lots of sisters and brothers by that point, maybe 5. And so I was by myself. It was kind of manageable. But as soon as my sisters came home and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I thought, like, my head felt like the pain was just incredible. So just had a lot of pain there. And that was another big trauma in my life, which took me down a lot of roads in terms of, headaches.
Yeah. Well, I mean, head trauma is a totally different animal, and this was completely unrelated, but fracturing your skull is no small thing.
No.
So
all of these, right. And I think the significance of all of these is, when people come to see me, I've had so many of my own traumas, sicknesses, pains. I mean, I've had a broken arm, a sprained ankle, torn ligaments. I've had a lot of issues, physical ones, just purely physical. And then obviously traumas that have emotional impact. That most of the time, there hasn't been too many things that really, I'm just like, I'm here. I'm solid. I'm here. I think the best thing I learned in Cranial, about 10 years in, they started creating, we would practice neutrality, which means I'm not giving energy to you. I'm not taking energy from you. Because every person, every human being, either when someone's in pain, if you're in pain, I'm either going to naturally take energy from you or I'm going to give you energy. We all have a preference. But that body may not need that yet. So if I'm doing that to you before your body asks me, it's when someone just gives you energy, it feels slimy or full or if someone takes it from you, you're like, whoa. So neutrality is just being neutral and listening. So it's like holding space for someone. They're in there. I'm holding the space for you to do your work. And I'm walking with you. If I come into the circle with you, who's holding the space? Work can't happen. Healing can't happen because then I become part of the trauma, the pain. Mm-hmm. That's where empathy sometimes can get in the way because I feel for you. Sometimes it's a good technique, but sometimes stepping into people's puddles is not a good overall, right? So I hold space. And so by having all these traumas, it's really helped me be able to be with people and be neutral. And so not a lot riles me, I guess. I'm just right there, and I've experienced a lot. I had a birth trauma with my first child, where I ripped severely 4 layers of, so I just have had a lot of different traumas, I think, which makes it really adds to, I think adds to my healing practice. I like the saying that your trauma creates your niche. So my traumas, right, creates my niche. It makes it really a good match. Because I haven't just stayed in them. I've worked through them. I think that's the other piece. I have to work through them. So I'm, so that I don't get triggered. When you're going through something that I have, and sometimes I'm a human being, so sometimes I do. And one of the tricks I learned was if I'm working with you on the table and all of a sudden I feel angry, oh my gosh. I'm like, what the heck is this? Is this mine? Mm-hmm. Is this yours? So energetically, I go out of the room and take myself out. If I still feel angry on the other side of the room, it's mine. If I don't, it's yours.
Interesting.
Isn't it?
Yes, I love what you do. You said that you got married, you're having trouble with sexuality, you started to go into therapy and try to figure out what was going on. Was that where you were exposed to the cranial therapy?
No.
So tell me about that piece of the journey.
So after I got married, I did the work. We lived in Virginia by then, and I did some really intensive work that got me going. I moved back to Reno. And by that time, I was a massage therapist working full-time as a massage therapist. I had a full practice, 94 to about, well, 94 to 95. I mean, I got here, got my license, started working. And about 2 years in, I went to a therapist here who was a colleague, and she did deep tissue like I did. I mean, I did deep tissue, and she had done a cranial one. And she goes, Amy, I have to give you, you have to come in and experience this. This is nothing like you're ever going to experience. So I go do it. She does the techniques on me. She gets to my head. And all of a sudden, I'm getting the headaches. She's touching me like this. Just like this. Well, like she's like doing this sphenoid technique. And she's holding my just right here by my eyes. And I'm like, I don't know what you're doing, but it is giving me the worst headache. And you need to stop. I mean, it's too much. And she goes, I'm barely touching you. I'm like, I don't care. It's too much. And then so she gets off me. I said, I got to figure out, I have to do some CE classes. So I'm like, I need to go to this. What the heck is this stuff? What is this? It gives me a headache. So I go, and every person, because you're learning, so they're really heavy handed, right? You know, your first class, you know, it doesn't feel heavy because like for me, I was such a deep tissue therapist. It was like, hush, this is so light, but it was really heavy handed. So no one really could touch my head in cranial one because I would get these huge headaches. So the TAs, and then they said, have you ever had any injury to your head? I'm like, oh yeah, I had a fractured skull. They're like, okay. And so then they could, you know, they're like, okay. So I just felt, I mean, 10 minutes in, she's talking about it. I felt like a bell went off in my whole body. Like, this is what I'm doing the rest of my life. Because I was so into the emotional component of massage, but because I'd be massaging someone, they start crying. And I'm like, what the heck am I supposed to do with this? Okay. And I would be with people. And so this just really drew me. And so I kept doing classes. And then, you know, I realized ever since I was little, I wanted to make people feel better.
Yeah.
I mean, that has been, I thought I was going to be a doctor, and that didn't manifest because of a lot of things, but really because of insurance and just where it was going. I just got turned off.
Yeah.
And, you know, I used to rub my mom's legs every night with, you know, Lubriderm. I mean, every night almost, for, you know, and people would hurt in high school, and I would just touch them. I mean, I would literally touch them. And this one, when I got into cranial, I've been doing it for about 7 years. I remember, I think it was after my high school reunion, this gentleman who was a year younger than me, he goes, oh, I told him what I did. He goes, you did that in high school. I'm like, what? He was a football player, and he had a head injury, and I went to see him in the hospital. And he said, you did something to my head. And I remember going to see him because you touched my head. I could feel this stuff happening. And it was so weird, but I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. I'm, you know, 60. I'm like, I don't even hardly remember. Like, wow. Okay. So it, you know, that's part of who I am, is wanting people to feel better in their body.
And then having the traumas of your own where you didn't feel better.
No, right. And, you know, I'm just such a driven person, right? I mean, I just, you know, so that brings me to current, you know, so I've done that. I mean, I did cranial, and I've been doing that. I moved to Hawaii, did cranial, came back to Reno. You know, I've worked with kids, I've worked with adults, I've worked with women. And I just really like, you know, working with complex pain patterns. I really find that most people come to see me have early childhood trauma. Imagine that, you know, they, whoa,
what?
And, you know, like, you know, like, so how old is it? How long even, you know, when, you know, and it's just like, wow. So a lot of times they have a complex pain pattern that nothing hits. And usually that's common with cranial. People don't get to cranial until they've tried everything else, because it's just a different therapy, and it's newer. It's been here since the 80s. But yeah, so a lot of times if it's just physical therapy works.
Right. Well, right. But like, your head injury was physical, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a lasting emotional impact on you, which I think is what PT does not address. The fact that even though, like, I've been in a car accident before, and I can separate the memory from a physical standpoint and the memory from an emotional standpoint, and they're totally different.
Right. And I think the head injury, you're right. So when I'm having the head injury, it's not slow motion. It's very fast. So it's just, It's like, think about getting shot. So the bullet is coming into you, the body's acting, right? So what happens if it goes all the way through you? It's clean. There's trauma in the body, but it's clean. If it stays in the body, that force, bam. The body has to do something with all that force. It's non-self. So it makes it really small, but it can create what's called an energy cyst. This energy that's force that's not yours, but that's in you. So that can mess up the system and emotion. So as I'm falling, that's the force of hit. But also if I'm like in a car accident, I'm seeing it, I'm like, I'm gonna get hit. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'm angry, or I'm hurt, or I'm like terrified. That's emotion, that's force too. Where does that go?
Yeah, that's kind of my point, because I think you're right about PT if it's just physical, but I can think of probably at least 8, probably 9 out of 10 times when there's some emotional attachment to what physically happened.
Right. I think acutely, if you get it done really quick,
Yeah.
like if I break my leg and it's traumatizing to me, I have something, but if I get it hit quickly in terms of therapy, that just moves out, because I equate, that forming of a pattern to jello. So jello is really, you want your body to be liquid to move. Liquid is good. We have this slide, fascia, you want it to slide. So if trauma happens, then it starts like gelatin. It starts to, we don't want things to set.
Yeah.
No jello, no gelatin, no,
Yeah.
we don't want jiggle wiggles or those, whatever. You remember those where you?
Yes.
I know those
very
things.
bad visual.
I know. My grandma used to do the jiggle or whatever those were, where they'd cut them out and they'd add more gelatin than regular gel. So they would really, really set. And so that's what you're looking at. So I think the thing is a lot of people don't come until it's very chronic, very old. They don't even know the layerings happen. And so there's a lot happening. So, that's where sometimes it's really great a match with talk therapy, because they can talk about it, they can do the body work, they can take what they've learned in the body work back to the talk therapy, and there's this give and take, and it's really beneficial.
Right. And I think the other reason, because I know when you told me about what you did, I was like, what? That's a thing? But if you're saying that here are the people that could potentially do this, chiropractors, dentists, I'm not going to tell my dentist ever, that I had a trauma. Like those are not situations when I'm the most realistically going to bring up something like an umbilical cord being wrapped around my neck. You do now with your dentist, but like I wouldn't go looking for his help on how to work through this physical and emotional trauma with, or maybe my chiropractor. I have had an adjustment. There have been a couple times when I've been adjusted that I cried. And it's like an instant switch where you're like, and I have had the same chiropractor for 15 years, but I set up and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, whatever you just released in me just triggered. It has nothing to do with you. I'm just going to allow myself to have this little cry because you released something. But I wouldn't have thought to take that conversation with him further.
But if he asked a question.
Right.
See, that's the whole thing. So a lot of times some practitioners only take the physical part of the class. Then there's the somato-emotional. So some people stop. Like Roffers tend to not want to go beyond because they like the structural. So there's a physical component to cranial, and there is then as you move into the curriculum, you're going to go deeper. Some people, you meet the tissue where it's at. You meet the tissue. Follow the tissue wherever. That is the connection with cranial. You don't go off in the story.
Yeah.
Because you have to stay connected to the tissue. If the tissue is releasing, it is significant. If the tissue is not releasing, that is a wild goose chase.
Yeah.
And a lot of therapists go into the story and the person's going through this thing, but there's nothing happening under my hands. Yeah. That's it's a good story. And they may have trauma that's really good. I mean, that's real, but it's not significant to this release here.
Right.
So that's the difference. I have to feel it in the tissue. So I have to stay grounded so I don't go off on, anyway. So
take me to 2004 now, because I find this very fascinating.
oh yeah, gosh, I know. Now we're getting into some good stuff. So
Now
2000, I know, there's all good. I mean, you just think. So I'm 30. I moved to Hawaii. I have a practice. My kids are, it's just great. I'm looking at, buying a house there and building a house and blah blah blah. And then I get diagnosed with thyroid cancer,
throat. Yeah, it didn't occur to me. Really.
Fudge. No, shut the front door. I mean, the big C, I don't know. That was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it was that was a 2x4. That was really between the 2x4 and the house burning down. It just, it blew so many of my thoughts and my structures, my psychic structures and my psyche and, all those things. Like, I just thought I was so healthy. I just thought all this stuff. I had worked through all this stuff. I had done everything. How could I get cancer? And cancer is non-discriminatory. Okay. And it was one of the best things because it, stripped down all that stuff that I still needed to work on, took me to a deep level. And it was, it brought about a deeper level in my work about slowing down the pace and creating a pace and really looking at educating people on how to take care of themselves and self-care. I went into this whole piece about how to help people with identifying the fight, freeze response. How do they know they're in chronic stress? How do they know the difference between that and burnout? And really develop this change your pace, change your life. And that was part of my practice. But, how I use it today is I just still educate all my clients. I don't do any more trainings. I did some trainings for a while and classes and I just realized my love was working with the clients one-on-one and just giving them everything that I had in the session. So I still use everything. I have a little fight, freeze in my bathroom, and it has my stop sign because I have a stop sign, a stop and breathe. I mean, I've just done so much. It's been a long time, and so that really took me to a different level. And just it's more quiet. I think I say now it's one of the best things that happened to me because it really let me get to know a lot more of myself and tear down some of those belief systems that, I was buying into that were not true, false systems and all that stuff. It just took me to a deeper level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in situations like that, when you're diagnosed with something and like you said, it's not discriminatory. There wasn't anything you could have done. It's something you're presented with instead of something you had control over not happening. Is that explained well? Am I explaining that well?
Yeah. Well, it's my responses. It's like, well, how do I respond? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to see all, like, I love the Louise Hay stuff, but one of the ways I use affirmations is what's my response to the affirmation?
Yeah.
Is it, yeah, right? What's going on the committee, right? Yeah, right. She's so full of it. Oh my gosh, I can't believe she's believing this shit. Or is it, yeah, that's what I really want. I want it so bad, but I can't get there. Or it's like, yeah, I'm working on it. Or yeah, I'm really in a good space. So it tells me where I am in my, where I am in my response. And I love that. And cancer, took me down, kind of like lava, took me down to the bare bone. It's like a big lava flow. Right. And living in Hawaii, I mean, you think, no, it's gonna miss me. It's gonna miss me. And it's this slow or this big explosion. Sometimes there's like the snow snake and it's coming. And there's nothing you can do.
Right. Right. And you use it as a catalyst to go deeper with yourself and deeper with your clients.
Yeah, again, it gives me another experience now. So it doesn't blow me out of the water. I think that's the whole thing, is using these things and to help me grow, for me personally, it's a win-win. It helps me, and then it just helps me expand and be able to go deeper, like you said, with my clients. And I think, the last thing where I'm at now is about a year ago, I got introduced to this company called Live Kaya. And I said, oh, I love the products and I'm going to use them for my clients. These are great tools for my clients.
Okay. I love this because we're going right back in. This is what I wanted to end. So this is great. And you're talking CBD. I mean,
Yeah,
This is awesome.
CBD, probiotics, right? So I said, okay, I love the CBD for my clients. I want to add it to my arsenal to give people tools. So as I started, and of course I have to research it. So I'm researching it. It says, you know, the microdosing is you have to take it for 30 days and find your, you know, your frequency, like 1 to 3 times a day, and how much you're going to take your dose, whether it's a half, you know, half a drop or full. So finally I thought, gosh, if I'm asking my clients to do this, I'm going to have to try it.
Right.
You know, to see. So I'm thinking for aches and pains, and you know, I'm like, I don't have any anxiety because you know, I just plow through things. I don't need it for that. No, I'm good. And then I took it. I took it on the day. At the first time I really noticed it was my husband was having his commander pinning ceremony in the Navy, and I was, you know, a little control, a little freaked out, and I took some, and I was so calm. What the heck is that? And then I was talking to a friend of mine who's a marriage and family counselor, so then I've been taking it for a while. She goes, well, you know, I think it would be really good for you. And I'm like, why do you think that? Well, you know, you have PTSD. You know, you have, you know, I'm like, what? She goes, you have anxiety. Amy, come on. And I'm like, I guess, you know, from a clinical standpoint, I guess, you know, you could say, maybe. So I realized I have this friend here my whole life, you know, this hypervigilance, where, you know, I may respond a little, just maybe, right?
Just a little bit, right.
Just a little. And she's been with me forever. So it just seems normal. And since I've been taking that CBD, she has just melted away. You know, it's just filled in those cracks. And my husband, this is how I know it's so significant. He goes, you know, I did something. He goes, you could have responded in so many different ways. I really like the way you responded to it, Amy. And he has said that to me several times since I've been taking the CBD. So to have your closest person who knows you in and out to say that, it's pretty significant. So it's another great tool for myself and for my clients. It's part of my arsenal now as well, but I do take it myself and I love it because it's medicinal and it just helps fill in those places that I could not reach with therapy, cranial, right, any other aspect, you know, and plant medicine is really powerful. So,
see, I love it. This is where I'm giving an opinion here, but this is where when they were making weed legal, I've never smoked it in my life. I haven't had an edible. I have no experience with it. I didn't have any desire to go get high when I was, okay. But if you're talking about it from just a medicinal standpoint, and you and I had a little bit of a conversation on this, there are a whole bunch of things and CBD doesn't have the THC in it. So like right, my husband can take it. He drives a truck. He would not test positive. So CBD is just one part of this, but just as a whole, if you look at the things that it can treat from a plant-based medicinal perspective and the alternative from pharmaceutical, 150% of the time, I'm going to go plant-based medicinal. I had a naturopath, I had my kids at home. Like I'm 150% going to go because it's not just about like going and getting high with your friends. And so when CBD came out, like you said, about a year ago for you, it was a little longer than that for us. And I looked at him and I'm like, you need to try this because you have so much trouble with your sleep and your schedule. Right. And it made such a difference. And I was like, holy crap. Then the legalization happened. I'm like, alcohol's legal and this isn't, and I can go get an Ambien? You've got to be kidding me.
I know. I tell you, for me, it's helped with anxiety.
Yeah.
It doesn't help me so much with sleep. So I wish it would, but you know, again, everybody has a different constitution, but it helps with, I use it topically as well as internally. So it's helped with some pain points. And I mean, it's just, it's worth a shot, you know, it's especially if you're having issues, you know, and so that's what I say. So, I mean, you know, I just love helping people feel better. I think that's through cranial, through providing good tools, through listening with my hands and, you know, with my ears and my heart, I think, and my mind, my whole body. You know, I think we have all these, this whole being is made up of all different parts of us and we need to use all of it. So I need to use my thinking brain, my heart brain, you know, my hands, you know, my spirit. I think it all comes into play. And my trauma is part of me and it's part of me.
Amy, thank you so much. This was so great. This was so fun.
That was a great way to end.